is our combined joint event with the Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis School of Education, in collaboration with the Midwestern Plains Equity Center and the Great Lakes Equity Center, to present Meeting the Needs of All Students During COVID-19 Virtual World Café. We are so excited to be able to welcome participants from all over our region and beyond. So we are welcoming participants from as far away as California, as far east as Maryland, from our states within our region, such as Minnesota, Ohio, Iowa, Michigan, North and South Dakota, Wisconsin, Indiana, and welcoming people from outside of our region. So we're very excited everyone that you all here to join us this afternoon. I want to take some time to introduce our facilitation team for today, and just have a chance to, for each member, just to say a quick hello. So we're welcoming Dr. Tambra Jackson, Dr. Kathleen King-Torius, again, myself, Sina Skelton, Dr. Jasmine Graham, Dr. Wasana Kinsembe, and Dr. Jeremy Price. We are also welcoming Dr. Tiffany Kaiser, Ms. Diana Rizal, Dr. Crystal Morton, Dr. Chris Gorman, Dr. Rosalind Floyd, Ms. Nikki Comer, Mr. Kyle Huskins, Ms. Robin Jackson, Ms. Katie Westnick, and Ms. Noelle Brington. So if we can have just a quick hello from the team, that'd be great. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for members to give a quick hello.
Hey everybody, we're so pleased to have you with us today. I'm Kathleen King-Torius, Executive Director of the Great Lakes Equity Center, as well as faculty in the School of Education here at IUPUI. Welcome.
Okay, thank you for waves and hellos. We'll have a chance to hear a little bit more from our team in just a few seconds. So our event this afternoon, we're going to go at a very quick pace. We have a lot jam-packed in. So we're going to start with some welcoming words from from Dr. Jackson and Dr. King-Torius. I'm providing an overview of our session right now. We're going to have a combination of some breakout small group discussions as well as a panel presentation. And then we will be able to give closings and provide some information about additional resources that you can access from the Great Lakes Equity Center, the Midwestern Plains Equity Assistance Center, and the IU School of Education. A note about access. We know that we are in different spaces these days. We're working remotely, and we also understand that many of us have been on Zoom lines or other distance learning technology. And so we want you to make yourself comfortable. Move about as needed, take breaks as needed. We will be providing a copy of this presentation at the end. And so our images are combined with alt text. So if you are using a screen reader, you would be able to use your screen reader to describe the images that are on the slide. And we are offering live captioning today. In order to access captioning, if you move your cursor to the bottom of your screen, a tool bar should pop up. To the left, towards the left of that toolbar, you will see a button that's labeled closed caption. Above that labeling, there's a little caret. You want to click on that caret, and they will give you options for closed captioning, and that way you can see subtitles if you so choose. This is an interactive work session, so we really want you all to engage, both using your video and audio. However, to reduce noise distraction, we ask if you're not talking for you to mute your mic. And then we will be using various Zoom tools this afternoon, including breakout rooms. So we will give you a bit of a tutorial on how we will use our breakout rooms when the time comes. We are recording this session. We make all of our learning experiences accessible as learning experiences and learning tools that people can access after the event. So we aim to make this experience accessible as well. The recording will be edited and then uploaded to our YouTube channel as well as our website, along with transcriptions. So as you are sharing, just keep in mind that this session is recorded.
Nina, are you sharing your screen?
Yes, is it not showing?
We can't see it.
All right, thank you. Let me try again. Okay, can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Let me just advance. So again, just to repeat that we are recording this session. So just keep that in mind as you are sharing. We would like you to join us via social media. Oh, I'm sharing the wrong video. There we go. We ask you to join the conversation, to extend the conversation and expand it via social media at #MapEquity. Also, like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. As we are engaging in these very courageous conversations, we ask you to keep in mind these 4 commitments. To stay engaged, that means present to the conversation, to speak your truth and hold space for others to speak theirs. Know that any conversation around issues of equity and anti-racism are issues and topics that are going to require us to experience discomfort. And so we lean into that discomfort as we have these important conversations. And we know that this work is work that is ongoing. And so we expect and we accept non-closure. However, we do expect to make progress. And so we keep these 4 commitments in mind as we engage this afternoon in these conversations. Our purpose today is really threefold. First is to connect, to build community, to build coalition, and to build networks around supporting all students, but particularly our students that have been and continue to be marginalized in our schools and our school communities. We also want this space and create this space for sharing. And so we're asking you to bring with you in your conversations important information, resources, knowledges that you would like to share with colleagues and to learn, not only from the facilitators in our breakout sessions and our scholars on our panel, but also to learn from each other. So I'll pass the mic, so to speak, over to Dr. Jackson to provide us some opening remarks.
All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the World Café event. The Great Lakes Equity Center and the Midwest and Plains Equity Center is housed within our School of Education, and we are very proud to be the home for this center. And we're very excited to sponsor the event today and look forward to doing more with our colleagues in collaboration. Given the times that we're living in now, I think appreciate the value of collaboration. And so I'm very excited about this, very excited that Sina and Kathleen invited us in as a co-sponsor. So welcome to the event.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson.
Dr. Jackson. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm Kathleen King-Torius. I'm the Executive Director of the Great Lakes Equity Center. And also I'm faculty in the School of Education. And so we're really pleased to have some amazing colleagues from the IUPUI School of Education here to facilitate some conversations with all of us today. So we'll be moving into breakout rooms in just a couple of minutes. But really, I'd like to frame today about communicating how families, communities, and institutions currently are and are able to partner together to to address the equity implications of this current context we're in. Social distancing, pandemic, illness, and death and loss to our communities and families. But we also have to acknowledge the historical and the current context of discrimination and racism for particular communities, families, and youth. So we look forward to seeking out and spending time talking about the innovations, the assets of our communities and families, while also thinking through the ways in which they have been marginalized in our schools and our communities. And so I know that you'll find the discussion to be rich. We encourage you to interact in all the ways that technology allows for you, and just welcome and thank you for being in this virtual space, the shared space with us today.
Thank you, Kathleen. So at this time, we're going to prepare to transition into our 4 breakout groups. So just to talk through quickly what those breakout groups are. So we've created 4 breakout groups around essential areas of work related to ensuring that all of our students are receiving, can receive, have access to supportive, inclusive learning communities. And these 4 topics are topics that have really risen to the top of areas of focus as school districts, as school communities are planning, not just sort of wrapping up the current school year, but really planning to reopen school in the fall. So we want to focus on the extent to which we're creating school communities that are attending to the mental health and social emotional awareness of our students and our adults that are in our school community. So our first breakout group will be around supporting mental health and social emotional wellness. And Dr. Jasmine Graham and will be the lead scholar in co-facilitating that breakout room. Our second breakout room is around really centering the importance of community care, accessing and leveraging the assets of our community, and how do we bring that to bear as we think about planning for reopening our school communities. And Dr. Lasana Kizembe will be the scholar facilitating that community, that breakout session. Our third is around leadership, the importance of leadership, not only leadership in terms of titles, whether we're talking about administrative, also leadership at multiple levels of the system, including our teacher leaders, our building leaders, and our student leaders, as well as then connecting with leaders within our institutions of higher education. So we will have our third breakout session around leadership, and Dr. Tambra Jackson will be our scholar leading that breakout room. And then lastly, but I think one of the areas that have been most on educators' minds as they plan for thinking through how to expand learning spaces in this time of COVID-19, from face-to-face in-person spaces to our virtual spaces and distance learning spaces. And so how do we really authentically support diverse students in distance learning? And Dr. Jeremy Price will be our scholar that's facilitating that breakout session.
To reintroduce my wonderful colleagues who are going to be part of our panel today and who were facilitating conversations in the breakout room. So you all met Dean Jackson, Dr. Tambra Jackson, and also we have with us Dr. Lasana Kizembe, Dr. Jasmine Graham, and Dr. Jeremy Price. If I could ask Dr. Graham, if you would introduce yourself again and just share a bit about your work, and then I'll pass it to Dr. Kizembe and finally Dr. Price.
Yeah, sure. Good afternoon, everyone. It's so good to be here with all of you. My research can be delineated broadly into 2 categories. First, I study Black mental health, trauma, and I tend to situate that work in schools and communities and families and other systemic bodies. Secondly, I study Black women's mental health, and that work is largely centered on the notion of strong Black womanhood as a health disparity and as a determinant of one's health. Before academia, I was an outpatient therapist, school counselor. I mean, the list goes on and on. Addictions counselor, I won't list all of it, but my clinical experience is broad and deep, and it informs my research, my approach to mental health, and how I train graduate students.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Dr. Graham. Dr. Kazembe, passing it to you, please.
Thank you. My name is Lasana Kazimbi. I'm from Chicago, and I've been here just over almost 3.5 years now. My background and research interests center on urban education, arts-based pedagogy, and global Black arts movements. So I'm also interested in social and racial justice in education. So the work that I do as a scholar, researcher, educational consulting, and teaching artist occurs in schools, communities, juvenile detention centers, and prisons. So I bring a great deal of expertise and interest in those areas, and those are the spaces that I get down in.
Thanks, Dr. Kazembe. Appreciate it. Dr. Price.
My name is Dr. Jeremy Price, and my full title is Assistant Professor of Technology, Innovation, and Pedagogy in Urban Education. And much of my research focuses on using technology to prepare teachers for social justice and for equity and inclusion, as well as I've been doing a lot of work in having conversations about race and religion and gender identity and sexual identity in suburban schools, as well as looking at white nationalism and online hate groups. So that's what I do. And so I've been doing actually a lot of COVID-19 work because I'm the only technology person in the School of Education at the moment.
Thank you, Dr. Price. All right, I'm going to jump in with a question. All of you, one of the reasons we have invited all of you to join us today is because you are engaged as partners in your communities in many, many rich, authentic ways. So I'd like to ask you to share with us ways that grassroots, community, and institutional assets, we really want to focus on assets here, can converge to address the current context of this. It's really an intersecting pandemic of racism and COVID-19 that is really coming together. So focus on assets and how can our communities and our institutional assets converge. Would anyone like to start us off there?
I can start off if nobody else is. So I've been doing a lot of conversations with schools and districts recently around these issues. And some of the things that I'd like to say is that, really the first thing that should be thought about and considered is keeping your students and your teachers and your community safe and healthy. And then everything else sort of flows from that. I've been hearing a lot of different schools having different plans for reopening in the fall, because that's what we're basically looking at this point. The other thing is that, and even this came up during the breakout room that I had just now, is thinking about the emotional and the trauma that students and communities have gone through in the past couple of months. But really, for my own expertise here, the thing for teachers and educators to think about with respect specifically to things like remote and distance learning is about what devices families and students have, and designing experiences that can be delivered through those devices. Not everybody has a laptop or a Chromebook or has access to broadband internet. So one of the things that can be done is to provide those services. And I know that a lot of schools and districts have sent out buses as Wi-Fi access points. But the other thing to consider is, can you provide learning experiences over a cell phone, for example, on a smartphone that would fit on that screen? So the other thing that really comes up is supporting the families and understanding how these online systems work, and how to navigate those, how to help their students navigate those, and to navigate the kind of work that they're expected to do.
Thank you, Dr. Price. I'm going to
Yeah.
make sure we've got some space for everyone's thoughts. And thank you so much. Those were really important, particularly because a lot of times those of us who have access most or all of the time don't necessarily stop to think about those. And those patterns fall often across racial and income lines. Dr. Kazembe, Dr. Graham, Dr. Kazembe, I saw you came off of silent mic a little earlier. So you ready with the...
I was practicing my mime skills.
Okay.
Yeah. One of the things that I feel very strongly about is this area of translational research. And it is very important to me that the work that I do as a representative and a faculty member, an employee, if you will, of this institution, that this work not stay locked up in this institution, but that it actually get out into the world and become of use. And then I become of use to the people. So one of the ways that I think we can begin to leverage our assets is for institutions and folks like myself within institutions begin to reimagine our role and begin to reimagine the kind of things that we can do with research. Two quick instances: I'm partnering with some colleagues across a different unit. We just applied for and got a COVID-19 research response grant. So we're going to be partnering with about 5 or 6 local Black arts and cultural communities, organizations here in Indianapolis to actually begin to reimagine how they respond in an era where they're being besieged on all sides by challenges, but also looking at some of the assets, practices, and processes within these institutions that we can help them leverage. The other one is a larger grant that we're writing right now for the William T. Grant Foundation. It's an institutional challenge grant. And again, the premise is to think about in what ways this research institution can put itself in service to local grassroots community organizations. So that's just one of the ways, is to sort of unshackle ourselves from the ivory tower and to get out in the street and begin to be of use to the people.
Yeah, and the power of collective arts movements, particularly
right.
Black arts movements, those innovations and resources that have been there for so long and that have been silenced in mainstream communities or neglected altogether, right?
That's right.
And then you also talk about positioning ourselves as servants to our communities, with our communities, the communities often where we sit and where communities were disrupted to build the very brick and mortar that we're sitting within as well. So thanks, Dr. Kazembe.
Thank you.
Graham, I'm going to kick it over to you. Thank you.
Yes, I think one of the critical factors that we need to consider are what are the students and families. Sometimes we get into these narratives that all students are struggling, and indeed, just like I said in my small group, many students are struggling, many families are struggling, but not all Black students and families are struggling, particularly those for whom school is a traumatic environment. So I think as we think through the feedback and the assets exploration, the assessment of assets, and how we can build students up, how we can build families up, we need to be aware of our audience. Are we speaking to folks for whom school was and is a traumatic environment? And how then are they dealing with social isolation, homeschooling, and COVID? They may or may not be struggling. I can think of several families and several students that are actually doing better now that they're being homeschooled in the context of a safe home as opposed to at a school with teachers who do not see their promise and their attributes. At the same time, I can think of other students and families that are having a hard time as a result of homeschooling and being socially isolated. So I think as we as a community of helpers think through the feedback and the support that we're going to give, we need to make sure that we are giving feedback and support that meets people truly where they are, not where our narratives portray them to be.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Graham. And I'm actually going to segue into another question because of the important points you're raising. Many of our families and students are experiencing, they're thriving at home and in their home communities, away from the marginalization and the violence of schooling. And those narratives are often silenced, neglected altogether, or shouted over by people in dominant racial and income positions very often. So that's a really important reminder, and thank you. So I'm going to ask us, and I'm going to put it right back to you, Dr. Graham, if that's okay, which is, what are the ways that we need to critique our institutions, our formal institutions, about how they are developing and publicizing and rolling out all these efforts around COVID-19, around meeting the quote needs of our students and families? What is worthy of critique of our institutions, if you'd raise a few points?
Oh, sure. The crux of whiteness, right? And how whiteness manifests in all of our structures and all of our systems in our society, particularly education. And this idea of what's normal, what's healthy, what's not normal, what's unhealthy, what's well, and what's not well. I think all of that is subject to critique anyway, but certainly in these times with COVID, certainly in these times as we intersect COVID with the racial unrest happening, and rightfully so happening in our nation and globally. I think whole gamut should be up for critique, right? How do we examine wellness? How do we examine what's right, what's wrong, what's healthy and not healthy? I think we have to go back to the foundations of our understandings about wellness and mental health and deficit in order to come up to emerge with something new, something better, something more equitable. I don't think us working from the notions and the systems that we have now will create any different outcomes. I think we really need to go back to the brass tack and think about what is healthy, what's unhealthy, and where are we as individuals who make decisions, as scholars, as leaders, as change agents, as teachers, as educators, as parents, where do we derive those notions from? Because just because we hold a notion doesn't mean it's accurate, and oftentimes it's very faulty.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Graham. I'm going to ask Dean Jackson. I'm not seeing you on your screen. I'm assuming, on my screen, I'm assuming you're still here. There you are. I'm going to ask, I know you lead many institutions, but in your role as dean or elsewhere, what critiques do you have of our formal institutions and the ways that they're supporting families and communities right now?
Mm-hmm. Similar to Dr. Graham's comments, I think it's an opportunity for us to really look at the ways in which our policies, practices, and procedures uphold whiteness and anti-Black racism in particular. One of the things I think gets in the way, it's not so much that we don't have the capacity, it's whether or not we have the will to do things, to make change. And I think that we use capacity as an excuse. And so one of the things that I've noticed with COVID-19, things that we said or things that would normally take 10 pieces of paper in order for the action to transpire, within a matter of 10 days, almost every kid in this country had left school. School has closed. We had virtual schooling sessions, things that teachers had been asking for in terms of being able to connect with kids, where school, for lots of different reasons, you think about health issues, kids can't come into the building. Teachers had been wanting to have more access to kids who were in home spaces. But we were able to do these things within a matter less than 2 weeks, where before there was 10 pieces of paper and lots of excuses and that sort of thing. And so I think it's an opportunity for us to critique the bureaucracy that exists within our institutions and the things that are providing barriers for exercising the will of those of us who are social justice seekers and doers. So that's one thing that I've been thinking about lately.
Thanks, Dr. Jackson. I also want to give you the opportunity to respond if there are particular innovations and assets in communities that you want to emphasize at this time.
One thing, I've been thinking a lot about the word innovation. In another role that I hold, I am working with partner pairs, classroom teachers, and teacher educators at the university level who are working together to develop so-called innovative practices to meet the needs of kids who tend to be marginalized in school. And one of the things that we talked about recently is innovation isn't always necessarily something new, but innovation can also be something that we know to be right and fighting for that rightness, right? Fighting for, we know that there are things that are good for children, right? And it doesn't necessarily, it's not new that we've known these things for a long time, but what could be the innovative part is exercising that agency to take up that fight, or to take up that fight in a different way. And I, with the issues around technology, one of the things that I've been urging people to do is to reach back to what I'm calling indigenous practices, not necessarily thinking about indigenous people, but the indigenous, the very rudimentary cultural practices of particular groups. A lot of communities of color have a rich oral tradition. And I think that, this lack of being able to be face to face and having to rely on technology, I think that we can meet some of this need of access through tapping into the oral traditions of communities of color. We don't all have to be on a Zoom room and that sort of thing. I know my son's preschool teacher, one of the things that she did for parents is she said, I'm here to talk. I'm here to talk to your baby because the preschool Zoom room is crazy. So I'm here, and so Kadir had an opportunity to talk to his teacher and get that attention that he seeks and wants, that in a normal everyday classroom, he would get some of it, but not in the way that she was able to give it to him because of, the transition. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Dean Jackson. All right, I'm going to open it to the group with the short time we have left, and I will pass it to Dr. Kazembe and Dr. Price first. Let's hear a few questions from the group. And Nikki, or whomever, I think Nikki, you're monitoring chat, but others are as well. If you can maybe give me a couple of questions or a question you'd like to emphasize.
Sure. Oh, sorry. Is that you, Robin?
It was. You go ahead.
Oh, pardon me, Robin. I'm sorry, my screen didn't have you on. There you are. Robin, over to you. Thank you.
Well, our illustrious, fearless leader posed a question in the chat. Sina asked, how do we decenter whiteness in our discourse related to wellness? How do we create space for educators to engage in critical self-examination of our own notions of wellness, mental health, etc.?
Right. Well, I know that that's specific to Dr. Graham's expertise. I also want to give the opportunity for Dr. Kazembe and Dr. Price to chime in around wellness. And there's lots of ways that wellness materializes and manifests and is defined. So Dr. Kazembe, will you take the first shot at that?
Yeah, sure. Ralph Ellison once wrote that he was talking about the blues. He was writing about the blues. And he said that as a form, the blues is an autobiographical chronicle of a personal catastrophe expressed lyrically, right? And I know that there was a point made earlier about just this way, this cultural way that especially Black folk have had of turning awfulness into awesomeness. And it is a way of communing with the spirit. It is a way of communing with one's history, not just during February, beyond Wakanda, beyond February, right? Beyond corporate types of art heroes and stuff that's given to us, but every day. And I know personally, I am engaging with the arts on a daily and consistent basis, be it, and now virtually, live performance, reading poetry, having poetry read to me, writing, journaling, all of these things are therapeutic, and I use them and write about them and teach about them as healing modalities. So there's so much to be said for being able to get things out and to write things and to read things. One of my big critiques about society today is that there is a spirit of pretentiousness in the age that we live in. There's a spirit of self-absorption. And I think when one is able to sort of free oneself, you can free yourself and travel in books. You can free yourself and travel in the biographies and the stories of other human beings. And then you read about the types of adversities that they've gone through. You begin to sort of see a window. You begin to sort of see a mirror, if you will. And you can actually begin to sort of relate to stuff that's being shared with you via the written word, the spoken word. And it can begin to form itself as a sort of release. You know, so I'm always pushing the arts on people: music, spoken word, poetry, theater, reading, literature. And I think in an era, to a point Toni Morrison made long ago, it's especially important to do those things in the midst of controversy and contention. When things are at their worst, it is important to sort of travel within and travel in that way, and to bring other people along with you on the journey. Those are just some of the thoughts that come to mind.
Thank you, Dr. Kazembe. I'm going to see if we can get another question from one of our participants. Robin, if you can pull something up from a participant, or if any participant would like to jump in after we give Robin about 5 seconds to scroll through.
I don't see many more questions on this side of the conversation.
What about Dr. Evans, Renita Evans said, I feel like it's not a question, it's more of a statement, but I think we can interrogate it a bit if you guys don't mind. I feel like institutions have gatekeepers who continue to drive out innovation to maintain the norm. That's her comment.
Our institutions are full of gatekeepers. Dean Jackson talked about that earlier with the bureaucracy, or some instances that can show up. Absolutely. Dr. Price, maybe you can talk a little bit about gatekeeping functions in your area of expertise.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things, and I think it actually has to do with the notion of health and wellness also, is actually the excessive standardization that schools often are dealing with, because it defines what a successful student and what a successful learner looks like in one particular way, and through particular lenses, and that's something that has actually, I believe, been really laid bare in COVID-19, because what you do is you see the successful teachers and the successful schools that really thought about and interrogated those standards and really asked themselves, well, what's important to teach and what's important to learn? And whereas I've seen a lot of parent complaints where basically the teachers would pass on the standards. The teachers would pass on the standards to the parents and expect the parents to teach the standards. So I think that one of the things that we should do, not just now, but moving forward, is really think about what is worth teaching and learning, and what do the standards displace. And most of the time what the standards displace are things like the arts, are things like culturally relevant and sustaining pedagogies and content. And so I'm hopeful that this will actually cause a lot of conversation nationwide.
Yeah, thanks for pushing that point too. I know you have a lot of expertise around universal design for learning, and that focus on expert learners is a big part of it. And we need to really shake up how we define competence and expertise with our youth and families. Dr. Graham, I know you raised, I'm sure you took Dr. Evans's point because it resonated for you. So I want to give you the opportunity to respond, and then we'll ask Dean Jackson if she has any closing comments for the panel, and then we'll wrap us up here real soon. Dr. Graham?
Oh, let me go back to the point. Okay. Yes, I agree. I agree that the institutions are full of gatekeepers that maintain the status quo, that maintain harmful status quos. I think that I don't know if there's one remedy to that, but I certainly think that us looking inward and having open, honest conversations about these matters is important. I think that what the work that we do in our School of Education could be a standard practice, should be a standard practice for other schools of education. Some of the hard interrogating work that we do as individual faculty members, as collective faculty members, in order to develop systems and structures that we hope are more equitable and just. It takes a lot of work. It's work that has to get done.
Yeah, and that's often set by the leader. That tone and that space has to be created as well, as much as we commit to that as individuals. Oftentimes the leader creates more formalized routine spaces. So Dr. Jackson, anything to add there? Dean Jackson.
I'll just say, in terms of leadership, I think I was in my notes, I think it was Kate in my breakout group who talked about her observation of how leaders are responding to this moment. And she talked about how really this is an opportunity to build something different. And if you don't have a leader who can see that opportunity, then you're going to be in an organization that maintains the status quo. And one of the things that I've been thinking about in terms of leadership is, and the kinds of leadership or the kinds of leader that I would like to be, and that is the concept of servant leadership. And to Dr. Graham's point, if leaders position themselves as servant leaders, then they are in tune to being of service and not using the leadership position for self, not using it as a stepping stone to get to the next spot, that sort of thing, but really listening to the folks that you're leading and leading beside them, not in front, not on top, that sort of thing, but being a leader who walks with the group and not above the group, so to speak. So I think anybody, though, can be a servant leader, regardless of whether you hold an official leadership title.
Thank you. Thanks for that reminder, too. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Graham, Dean Jackson, Dr. Kazembe, Dr. Price. Our pleasure to have you with us today. I know we had a few glitches getting people in the right spot, but thank you. And we have a few thank yous and a few final slides just to wrap us up.
Thank you, Kathleen, and thank you again to our panelists. And thank you all to the participants for great questions, both questions in the chat and in the breakout rooms as well. So to close us out, I'm going to get us back to our presentation. The special thanks to Sophie Richardson and Javier Barrera for their support in doing all the things in terms of getting the materials together, getting information out. So special thanks to Sophie and Javier. And then I want to alert participants to some map resources so that you can find on our website. Please, if you haven't visited our Equity in Education during COVID-19 Flipgrid, please do so. This is an opportunity for you to leave a brief video sharing your own ideas or resources that are happening within your own school communities, and also to hear from resources shared by others. Visit our COVID-19 Pandemic Resource Support page. Included on this page is a wealth of resources, including hyperlinks to various different websites, downloadable digital print resources, various links into other resources, as well as the resources that are located on our own website. So please visit our COVID-19 Pandemic Resource Support page. And in the future, coming soon, is our anti-racism support page as well. So check out our website soon and check out those resource pages. We have a number of different professional learning experiences that are focused on engaging in collaborative discussion around these issues and others related to making sure that we're creating inclusive and responsive learning communities for our students in this age of COVID-19, and to address and to help promote anti-racist policies, practices, and structures and discourse. So one is our virtual coffee house series. We have our last series coffee house experience coming up soon. We also have our families learning from families, our virtual roundtable. These roundtable experiences are specifically for our families, and it's a way to bring family members together to again learn with and from each other. I also want to share some resources from the School of Education, just information about their teaching programs, their master programs, and doctoral degrees. So visit the IUPUI School of Education website for more information. With that, we want to hear from you. We learn from our participants to make things better. We are a continuous learning and continuous improvement organization and learning organization. So in the chat box, there should be a link to the post-session questionnaire. Please take time to fill out that questionnaire. We take your feedback very seriously, and we use that to improve future opportunities. And with that, I want to thank you again all for joining us on this for this World Cafe. Thank you so much for engaging, wonderful ideas and conversations, and we look forward to you coming back.